Mama Abini, I'm not ready to have this baby. Is there anything you can do to help me?
My dear, it's too late to safely get rid of the baby. It could be very dangerous for you.
Amina's heart sank. She didn't know what to do. But then Mama Abini said something that surprised her. If you don't want the baby, you can sell it after it's born. There are people who will pay a lot of money for a healthy child. Once upon a time, in a small, peaceful village called Kilimanjaro, amidst the lush green fields and a gentle river, lived a young girl named Amina. Amina was beautiful, with a radiant smile and a kind heart that endeared her to everyone in the village. Amina's father was a hard-working farmer, toiling daily in the fields to provide for his family. Amina's mother was a resourceful woman who sold small items at the village market, always trying to ensure they had enough, even though their life was not abundant. Though poor, Amina's family was warm and loving, their home filled with affection. Amina had a few close friends with whom she walked to school each day, their joyous laughter echoing through the village. Amina was intelligent and quick-witted, always paying close attention to her teacher's lessons and striving to excel. She consistently topped her class, earning praise and small rewards from the headmaster each week, like a shiny pencil or a beautiful little book. Amina was thrilled and proud, for she knew she made her parents proud as well. The entire village loved Amina. They praised her and had high hopes for her. Amina is a good girl. She will achieve great things, they said. And Amina would just smile, dreaming of a bright future. Amina grew older. She reached her final year of school. It was during this time that she became close friends with a girl named Binta. Binta wasn't as intelligent as Amina and wasn't as beautiful, but she had a different way of doing things, sometimes not the best way. The other girls in the village warned Amina, "Amina, be careful of Binta. She doesn't always make the right choices." But Amina wouldn't listen. She liked Binta and wanted to be friends with her. One day, Amina arrived at school with an empty stomach. There was no food at home, and her parents couldn't provide for her. Amina was sad and disheartened, but when she arrived at school, she saw Binta carrying 2 plates of food. Binta smiled and said, "Amina, I brought this for you. I made it especially for my special friend." Amina was surprised and grateful. "Thank you, Binta," she said, and they sat down to eat together. From that day forward, their friendship grew stronger. Amina felt lucky to have a friend like Binta, who was always there for her, even though Binta wasn't the best influence and sometimes did things wrong. Despite Binta, Amina continued to study hard. She listened to her teachers and always tried her best. Amina believed that as long as she stayed true to herself, everything would be okay. After school, Amina and Binta spent a lot of time together. They would stroll through the village, visit the market, and talk about everything. Amina noticed that Binta always had nice clothes, beautiful jewelry, and other things Amina couldn't afford. It made Amina curious. One day, she asked Binta, "How do you get all these nice things? Where does the money come from?" Binta smiled and said, "The money comes from a man named Kola. He gives me money and buys me presents." Amina was confused, asking Binta, "Why would he do that? What do you do for him?" Binta looked around, making sure no one was listening, then whispered, "I sleep with Kola, and he gives me money. It's easy, and I get whatever I want." Amina was shocked. She couldn't believe what she was hearing.
"But what if you get pregnant?"
Amina asked, her voice trembling. Binta shook her head, laughing dismissively. "Don't worry, Amina. I know how to take care of it. I won't get pregnant. There's nothing to be scared of." Amina was confused and worried. She had never even considered doing something like that, but Binta made it sound so simple, almost silly. Amina didn't know what to think, but she trusted Binta. Binta seemed so confident, and Amina didn't want to lose her friendship. Amina kept quiet, going along with Binta, though deep down she felt something was wrong. One beautiful morning, Amina was on her way to Binta's house when she ran into a man named Akin. Akin was young, handsome, and very popular in the village. He was a palm winemaker, and he owned a large farm where he produced the sweetest palm wine anyone had ever tasted. Akin was not only hardworking but also very kind. As they talked, Akin looked at Amina and smiled. He liked her beauty and gentleness. Before they parted ways, Akin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, beautiful box. Inside was a pair of stunning earrings. He presented them to Amina, saying, "These are for you, Amina. I hope they bring a smile to your face." Amina was surprised and delighted. "Thank you, Akin. They are beautiful," she said, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. From that day forward, Amina started seeing Akin every day. They would talk, laugh, and sometimes walk to his farm together. Akin always made Amina feel special, and she began to look forward to spending time with him. The days turned into weeks, and Amina and Akin became closer. One day, in a moment of quiet intimacy, they slept together. Amina felt a mixture of emotions. She liked Akin very much, but she also felt uncertain about what they had done. Meanwhile, Amina's parents were busy making plans for her future. They wanted her to learn a skill that would help her in life, so they decided to send her to a different village called Mombasa, famous for its vocational training and bustling market. They thought Mombasa would be a good place for Amina to grow. A few weeks after her encounter with Akin, Amina realized something that made her heart sink. She was pregnant. Worried, she went to Akin and told him the news, hoping he would stand by her. But Akin shook his head and said coldly, "No, Amina, I'm not responsible for that. It's not my child." Then he turned and walked away. Amina felt heartbroken and alone. The man she thought cared for her had rejected her when she needed him most. Now, as her child was about to be born, Amina didn't know what to do. After Akin's rejection, Amina felt lost and afraid. Her parents, unaware of her troubles, sent her to Mombasa to learn a trade. They wanted her to have a skill that would help her in life. Mombasa was a large village, known for its vocational training and bustling markets, attracting people from far and wide to learn and trade. As Amina left her parents' home, she felt a mixture of emotions. She was excited to learn something new, but she was also scared about what was happening with her child. When she arrived in Mombasa, she stayed with a distant aunt who lived near the market. The aunt was kind and welcomed Amina into her home, but Amina couldn't stop thinking about the baby growing inside her. She didn't want it. She didn't know how she could possibly take care of a child on her own. Amina decided to seek out a midwife in the village. The midwife, known as Mama Abeni, was a woman respected by everyone in the village, someone people turned to when they needed help during pregnancy. Amina went to see Mama Abeni and explained her situation. "Mama Abeni, I'm not ready to have this baby. Is there anything you can do to help me?" Mama Abeni looked at Amina with a kind but stern gaze.
My dear, it's too late to safely get rid of the baby. It could be very dangerous for you.
Amina's heart sank. She didn't know what to do, but then Mama Abeni said something that surprised her. "If you don't want the baby, you can sell it after it's born. There are people who will pay a lot of money for a healthy child." At first, Amina was shocked at the thought of selling her baby, but as she thought about it, a new feeling washed over her. She could make money from this. Maybe this was the solution to her problems. She wouldn't have to take care of the baby, and she would have money to live on. Amina looked at Mama Abeni and nodded. "Okay, I'll do it," she said. She felt a mixture of relief and excitement. Instead of worrying about the baby, Amina began to focus on the idea of making money. Her thoughts were no longer on learning a trade, but on giving birth so she could sell the child. Amina didn't feel the excitement or anxiety that other expectant mothers felt. Instead, she was consumed by the idea of making money. As the months passed, Amina's belly grew, and soon it was time for the baby to be born. Mama Abeni was ready, and she had found a buyer who wanted to adopt a child. When the day arrived, Amina gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The baby cried loudly, full of life, and Mama Abeni placed her in Amina's arms. Amina looked at her daughter, but she didn't feel anything. She didn't feel the love or the bond that new mothers often felt. Instead, she thought about the 500 gold coins and the shiny jewelry that were waiting for her after breastfeeding. Amina handed the baby to Mama Abeni, who took the child to the buyer. The buyer was overjoyed and gave Amina the gold coins and jewelry he had promised. Amina looked at the money in her hands, feeling exhilarated. She didn't think about the baby she had just sold. All she could think about was the money she now had, the gold coins jingling in her pocket and the sparkling jewelry in her hand. Amina decided this was better than learning a trade.
I can make even more money by selling babies, she thought.
Instead of focusing on her vocational training, Amina planned to get pregnant again. She knew that as long as she could keep having babies, she could keep selling them and making money. Amina didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. It was just a way to get rich quickly, she told herself. It didn't take long for Amina to get pregnant again. This time, she was pregnant with a man named Tunde, just another man in the village. When Amina told Tunde she was expecting his child, he reacted the same way Akin had, shaking his head and saying, "That's not my child, Amina. I don't want anything to do with it." But Amina didn't feel sad or worried. Instead, she was happy. She was already thinking about the money she could make by selling this baby too. Without wasting any time, Amina ran to Mama Abini's hut, overflowing with excitement. "Mama Abini, I'm pregnant again!" Amina exclaimed, practically dancing with joy. Mama Abini looked at Amina with concern. "Amina, you have to be careful. Selling babies is not something to be taken lightly. It can lead you down a path of regret." But Amina didn't want to listen. She smiled and said, "This is the path I've chosen, Mother. I'm going to keep doing this. It's the best way to make money." Mama Abini sighed, but she knew Amina wouldn't listen. She helped Amina through her pregnancy, just as she had before. After 9 months, Amina gave birth to a baby boy. He was healthy and cried loudly as he entered the world. But Amina didn't feel the need to hold him or even look at him. She knew the buyers were waiting outside. Without a second thought, Amina handed the baby to Mama Abini, who took him to the buyers. This time, the money was even bigger. The buyers gave Amina 2,000 gold coins and more jewelry, even more beautiful than before. Amina was overjoyed because the money was far more than she had ever imagined. She didn't think about the baby she had just sold. All she thought about was the fortune she was accumulating. As Amina looked at her growing pile of gold and jewelry, she felt powerful. She believed she had found the perfect way to get rich, and nothing else seemed to matter anymore. Amina's plan was even more successful than she had imagined. She became very wealthy very quickly. Every time she became pregnant, she sold the baby and received more gold coins and more jewelry. The more babies she sold, the wealthier she became. Amina soon became the wealthiest person in the village. She lived a luxurious life in Mombasa, with the finest clothes, the most beautiful jewelry, and anything else she desired. But as Amina's wealth grew, Mama Abini's concern grew with it. One day, Mama Abini sat down with Amina and said, "Amina, you need to stop selling your children. They are your future, your own flesh and blood. You can't keep doing this." Amina just laughed and waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, Mama Abini. I have plenty more children inside me. I'm going to keep making money this way, and nothing is going to stop me." Amina had heard the warnings, but she was too focused on her wealth and the easy life she was living. She sent money and gifts back to her parents in Kilimanjaro. Amina's parents were astonished by the amount of money she had. They didn't know where all this money came from, but they were very proud of their daughter for doing so well in Mombasa. By the time Amina decided to return to Kilimanjaro, she had sold 10 of her children. Each sale had made her richer and more powerful. She felt like she was on top of the world, believing nothing could go wrong with her bags full of gold. Amina was ready to go home and show everyone how successful she had become. She didn't think about the children she had sold or the warnings she had ignored. All she cared about was the wealth she had accumulated and the luxurious life she had built for herself. When Amina finally returned to Kilimanjaro, she looked so different that even her parents didn't recognize her at first. She was dressed in the finest clothes, her skin glowed, and she wore expensive jewelry that sparkled in the sunlight. The villagers gathered around, amazed by her beauty and wealth. "Who is this beautiful woman?" they whispered to each other, unable to believe this was Amina, the girl who had left them. It was Binta, Amina's old friend, who was the first to recognize her. "Amina, is it really you?" Binta exclaimed, running over and hugging Amina tightly. The villagers were stunned. This was Amina, the girl who had gone away to learn a trade in Mombasa. They celebrated Amina's return with joy and admiration. Amina used all the money she had to build herself a big, beautiful house. She didn't stop there. She also rebuilt her parents' house, making it magnificent and comfortable. Amina's parents were so proud, thinking their daughter had achieved great things in life. Amina lived alone in her large house, surrounded by all the possessions she had accumulated from selling her children. She enjoyed the luxury and comfort that money brought her, and she had no worries. The men in the village were captivated by Amina's beauty and success. Many of them proposed to her, thinking they could share in her wealth and happiness. But Amina always said no. "I'm happy with my wealth and see no reason to get married," she said with a smile. Amina believed she had everything she needed. She was wealthy, beautiful, and admired by everyone in the village. Her life seemed perfect, and she didn't think about the price of her wealth or what the future might hold. As time passed, Amina's parents began to worry about her. They saw that she was rich and successful, but she wasn't married. In their hearts, they believed that having a husband and children would bring true joy and happiness to Amina's life. One day, Amina's mother gently said to her, "You have everything, but you're still alone. It's important to have a husband and children to complete your happiness." Amina thought about what her mother said. Though she had always been happy with her wealth, she began to wonder if something was missing. Maybe her parents were right. Soon after, Amina met a man named Kwame. Kwame was also wealthy and came from a respected family in the village. He was kind, handsome, and seemed very interested in Amina. They spent time together, and not long after, Akin proposed to Amina. Amina agreed, thinking marriage would finally make her life complete. Their wedding was a grand affair, attended by the entire village. There was music, dancing, and feasting, and everyone commented on how good the couple looked together. Amina felt happy and hopeful as she began this new chapter in her life. But as the months turned into years, something troubled Amina. 2 years had passed, and she was still not pregnant. Kwa's mother, who was eager to have grandchildren, began to pressure Amina. She often said, "Why haven't you given us grandchildren yet, Amina? It's a wife's duty to bear children for her family." Amina tried to stay hopeful, but the pressure was mounting. One day, Kwame's mother couldn't contain her frustration any longer. She stormed into their house and shouted, "Amina, you're barren. You can't stay in this house anymore. My son needs a wife who can bear him children." Amina was devastated. She loved Kwame and didn't want to leave, but her words were final. With tears in her eyes, Amina packed her belongings and left Kwame's house. She went back to her own home, feeling empty and alone. The marriage she thought would bring her happiness had ended in sadness. Amina realized that all the wealth in the world couldn't fill the emptiness of not being able to have children. Sitting in her large house, surrounded by the wealth she had accumulated, Amina felt a deep sadness. She had everything she thought she wanted, but now she was more alone than ever. After being driven away by Kwame's mother, Amina tried to rebuild her life. She hoped to marry again, thinking maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness with a different man. But no matter how hard she tried, no man wanted to stay with her because she couldn't have children. The rumors spread quickly through the village, and people began to look at Amina differently. One day, Akin and Tunde, the 2 men Amina had loved, both came to ask her, "Where is my child, Amina?" To both men, Amina gave the same answer, "I lost it. I had a miscarriage." But Amina's lies couldn't stay hidden for long. One villager had overheard one of Amina's conversations, and he had heard everything. This villager knew the truth about what Amina had done in Mombasa. Without hesitation, he told the men, "Amina didn't lose your children. She sold them. She sold her own children to get rich." The men were shocked and angry. The gossip mongers, who had once admired Amina, now looked at her with disgust and fury. Amina realized that her actions had finally caught up to her, and the consequences were far worse than she had ever imagined. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with dread, Amina knew she had no choice but to try to find the children she had sold. She went back to Mombasa in desperation to try to right the wrong she had committed. When she arrived, she went straight to Mama Abini's hut, hoping the midwife could help her. "Mama Abini, I did a terrible thing. I want to find my children. Can you help me?" Mama Abini looked at Amina with regret. "Amina, you've committed a sin. You can't undo what you've done. Mama Abini handed Amina a piece of paper. This is a list of the people who bought your children. You can try to find them, but don't get your hopes up. Amina nodded, taking the paper, her heart pounding. She went from house to house, knocking on doors, pleading with the people who had bought her children. But Amina's efforts were in vain. Some denied ever knowing her, while others refused to return the children, saying they were now part of their families. Each rejection carved deeper into Amina's soul, and she felt the weight of her choices crush her spirit. After many futile attempts, Amina returned to Kilimanjaro in shame, leaving Mombasa with her heart filled with sorrow and her mind full of regret. She felt more alone and broken than ever. In a final act of repentance, Amina gave away all her money and her house, but the villagers refused her gifts. They didn't want anything that came from such a dark place. Determined to make amends in any way she could, Amina sold everything she had left and gave the money to the less fortunate people in the village. Then, with only a small bag, she left the village, taking nothing with her but her sadness and her regret. Amina settled at the entrance of the village, far from the luxurious life she once had, left only with her loneliness and her remorse. Amina lived out the rest of her days in solitude, her heart full of regret. As she sat by the entrance of the village, she hoped that her story would help others avoid the path she had taken. She had learned that true wealth wasn't found in gold or jewels, but in love and life, which she had once taken for granted. Amina's story is a cautionary tale about greed and the price we pay for bad choices. Material wealth can bring temporary pleasure, but it cannot buy happiness, love, or peace of mind. Amina's actions serve as a reminder that we must live authentically and not barter away sacred things to achieve selfish goals.